Hello everyone, Jonathan Alfonso, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to go over a little bit about who is actually transacting in today's market. Last week, I understand the Fed met. They raised the benchmark Fed funds rate by another 75 basis points. This is in line with what they said they were going to do, which is that they were going to continue raising rates. As of me recording this video right now, the US 10-year Treasury, which is what most closely follows mortgage interest rates, is at 3.87%, which means that we are at the highest we have been in years. And while many people are predicting the end of the housing market and it's going to crash, there's a lot of fundamental things with the market that are still right, which means some people buying a home is still going to make sense. And today I want to go over who are these people. For who does it make sense to buy in what is definitely one of the most volatile environments we've had in a while, an environment that is not as favorable as it was a year ago. So what exactly would incentivize, or what should someone do, under what circumstances should they actually buy a home? Let's go get into those reasons. Before I continue, if I could just ask you one favor. As you all know, we depend a lot on people liking and subscribing to our channel. This is what allows us to amplify our messages and have as many conversations as possible. I really appreciate you all watching my videos. Please stay tuned to the end because I do have a very controversial last point as to potential buyers, and I look forward to reading your comments down below. Now back to the video. The first type of buyer that should probably still buy in this market is the buyer that is looking at buying a property that is irreplaceable, very difficult to find, any of those properties that there is very limited inventory. So for example, once you move away from the coastline in Miami, there's lakes that are near the area that I live in. For example, there's one called Lake Catalina. If you go a little more west, there's one called Blue Lake that's at a little bit lower price point. Or if you go down south, there's one called E-Lake, or you can even go north into Miami Lakes. Those areas, they have certain properties are on the lake. Some of those lakes are motorized, and people get to enjoy waterfront living without the high expense of living on the ocean front, which you will get on the coastline in Miami. Or conversely, earlier this year, I sold a property in Key Biscayne. That was a property that we sold right under $15 million. Now, buyers were admitting that it was a difficult price point, but we were the only waterfront asset in a very desirable bay where only certain individuals can live there. People with very big boats want to be on that water. People understood that there's a premium to be paid. And if you're the buyer, yes, you got to pay it. And yes, you're going to get there, but you're going to get an asset that otherwise will not become available again. God knows how long. And you have to keep that in mind. Or you can go into other price points, which is maybe it's a small, close-knit community. There's a bunch of communities, for example, located in my market that are 15 to 30 homes where the turnover is very low. Homeowners typically don't sell. And if something comes up there, you're gonna have to take advantage of it. Consider buying it now, or otherwise your next opportunity may not come for 3, 4, 5 years down the road. At what point are you sacrificing time for the kind of gamble that our price is gonna come down to a lower amount versus your actual ability to live where you want to live and enjoy living in a community where you really want to be? The second type of buyer that I believe should still consider buying in this market is the individual who is actually still getting a deal. Say what you may about the markets, I understand mortgage rates are at an all-time high. No matter what, you can look at even very difficult markets like 2010 and 2011. There was still a lot of transactions going on, and that's because at the end of the day, people are still going to be transacting. In my opinion, if we go down, worst case scenario, maybe the market goes down, at least in my market, 5-10%. How much you get, who knows? But the more likely probability is that pricing will just stay stable and kind of go sideways throughout the coming years. So I think this next type of buyer, for example, is a perfect example, which is if you're the buyer that is still actually getting a deal. And what I mean by that is if you run the comparables on the property, let's say is worth $1 million, but if it were repaired and you're getting it for $700 and you believe you can do work for $100,000, if you think there's a spread in there between the work that you could do and what it would be worth after it's done, I still think you need to kind of factor that in, and you're probably a buyer in that market. Or maybe it's an alternate scenario, which is maybe the property's worth $1 million. It has a lot of improvements that aren't factored into the value. For example, the owner could have over improved the property. They could have put higher end appliances than they should have, and you're getting it a little bit below market, and you start to think of, well, considering the prices of everything is going up, you're not going to have to get any materials. You're still getting a deal. I think you're still a buyer in this market, and then you just have to think of interest rates may be high. If I'm a finance buyer, maybe down the road you refinance. If you're still getting a deal, you're probably still a buyer in this market. The third type of buyer that I believe is still a buyer in this market is individual that has the financial stability. That could be the individual that either maybe they have significant cash on hand. For example, just a couple of weeks ago, we just closed for a buyer that he was upgrading slightly. he was staying well within his budget, and he bought a home for $900,000 cash, but it met all of his criteria, and he's not concerned because he's planning on being there for the next 10 years. Or maybe you're in the individual that maybe you don't have all the cash in the world, but you're in a recession-proof industry. You understand that while the market may be volatile and while there is, predictions that, unemployment will go up, you believe you're not at risk because for certain factors, you've been at this job and your career and your industry is very stable. If you're still needing housing and you have job stability, then you're not taking that big of a risk by going out there and buying a home. Same thing for that individual that has the cash on hand. So if you're that type of individual and you need housing, you're still a buyer in this market, you can still go out there and transact. So I think those types of buyers are still going to be out there and transacting in this market. The fourth type of buyer that I believe will still be buying in this market is the individual that is trying to mitigate their rent expense. If you're the individual that you are just watching year over year, your rent's climbing. In fact, Zillow showing their August numbers, it's close to, there's still been a 12% increase in rents year over year. Those individuals that are out there and they're watching their rents climb and climb. If you make the financial analysis that you realize, listen, my monthly rent has climbed to $5,000, and for $5,000 I can go buy a similar home in the market, and you start to analyze those variables and you're looking at your down payment, etc. That type of buyer, if they're still facing the possibility that they are going to every month be contributing money towards rent where no portion of it gets saved in any way by going towards equity, and they can go out there and possibly buy a home and they can lock in their rent expense for the next 5, 6, 7, 10 years, however long they plan on being in the property. I think that person that is a long-term occupant of an area, in other words, they're not somebody that's transitory, there's somebody that is going to be there for a while and they want to lock in their rent expense, they might go out there, they're still going to be a buyer, and then one of two things are going to happen down the road. Either interest rates will keep climbing up, which means it's going to be pushing more people towards rent, which means probably it may continue to put pressure on rents to go high, which means that individual locked in their rent, or demand keeps slowing down for home purchases, which means rates come down, and which means that individual may have the possibility to lower their monthly payments down the road. Remember, most people don't buy based on purchase price. Most people buy based on the amount they can afford on a monthly basis. If the amount that you can afford on a monthly basis coupled with the amount of the down payment that you put, and you kind of run that scenario, still makes sense for you, those individuals may be wanting to lock in their payments, not have to deal with every year dealing with a renewal and dealing with the possibility of having to relocate. The fifth and final individual that I believe is still a buyer in this market is any individuals that are looking to create security in their housing situation. And this is kind of an offshoot of number 4. It may be tied to their rent expense, or it could be tied to other factors. And the most important thing is going into these tumultuous times where we have a lot of different variables and a lot of noise about what could happen with the economy. Most of that noise being, hey, listen, it looks like things are gonna be a rough patch. Maybe certain individuals are still gonna want to lock in their housing, because no matter what, imagine if you're living in a transitory spot and you're renting, and then yes, your rent may be low, but if you're able to knock in, maybe your children go to school in the area and you wanna make sure that your housing, you have somewhere that you own, that you can be there for the next 5, 6, 7 years, as opposed to you're renting and at any point your landlord maybe has a difficult financial situation and says, hey, listen, I'm gonna need you to move out, and even though you have a lease in place, they start making things difficult for you, and you start going through those variables. Or the other side of it is, no matter what happens, you've locked in all the variables in your life. You have a house in the area that you want with the variables that you want, and you know that you're comfortable there, and you know that no matter what happens in the world, you're living where you want to live, and you have that peace of mind. And this is a very controversial thing that I'm going to say, and I've mentioned this to a couple of people. When the world goes down and things happen, let's say we go into something as what happened in 2020, right? When things get really bad, you're going to have a higher probability of negotiating something with a bank than you are with a landlord who is a very small institution and is going to have issues. So I'm not hoping that people get into difficult situations. What I'm saying is that if you've locked in your home and you have that security, right, along with other variables, and you feel it, chances are you're going to be able to at least sleep better at night knowing that your housing situation is controlled by you. No matter what, every day we have less and less materials, we have less and less houses being built, we have less inventory, and we have plenty of people that are locked in. So some people may just want that peace of mind of knowing I'm sleeping somewhere that I own every night. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Now, I understand that what I am saying is probably controversial to some, because so many people out there right now with everything that's going on, they just want to scream like,
nobody's gonna buy a house.
and the reality is when you look at the numbers, people will, and I do think these types of people will be buying in this market. There will still be transactions, and yes, the nature of our conversations, the nature of the interest rates being paid, the pricing, all those things are going to be in flux, but certain people are going to have to make that decision. And I want to know, what do you think? What are you seeing in your local market? What's going on? It's been a week now since the Fed announced their rate hike, since the market's been pricing in higher interest rates, and I want to know, what are you seeing in your local market? Please let me know down below. I want to hear your comments. I want to engage in conversation, and thank you so much for watching this video. See you soon.